Let's get honest for a second. How many times have you had a big New Year's resolution with all the motivation in the world, only to look up in February or March and think, wait, what happened? Or maybe you've hit that moment where you start strong, you're in the zone and you're super committed. And then life gets lifey. Kids get sick, work gets busy, your routine starts to slip, your energy dips, and suddenly that huge resolution you were so excited about feels really overwhelming or even impossible. So if you've ever had a year when your January energy really felt like it belonged to a different person than your April or July energy, you're not alone. And today I want to give you a different way to approach growth, a way that doesn't require willpower, pressure, or perfection. Because here's the truth I found after years of coaching leaders is resolutions fade, but habits build your life. January intentions may motivate you, but year-long habits transform you. So today we're going beyond resolutions and diving into how to build habits that last all year. Habits that support your leadership, your fulfillment, and your growth. And habits that bring you closer to the life you actually want to live. Well, hey dreamers, welcome back to your Dream Coach podcast. I'm Shayla Wey. I'm a small business coach, growth strategist, and believer that your dream life starts the moment you lead like you mean it. So let's talk about how to create the kind of habits that don't just last through January, but carry you through the entire year. Every year, millions of people set resolutions, and research shows that 91% of them fail by February. Why? Well, because resolutions are usually too big. Sometimes they're too vague, too perfection-based, too future-focused, even sometimes too disconnected from everyday behavior. Sometimes I've talked to leaders that try to change everything, and it's just too out of in sync with how someone is every day. Or even we just depend too much on motivation. So there are a couple of really good books, one by James Clear, Atomic Habits, and another really good one by BJ Fogg called Tiny Habits. And both these books do a really excellent job reminding us that systems beat motivation, habits beat hype, and identity beats goals. And so what I have found is that leaders who set resolutions focus on outcomes. Leaders who actually change focus on identity and behavior. So instead of, I want to get more organized, shift to thinking, I am someone who ends each day with clarity. Instead of maybe saying something, I just want to grow my business, shift to, am I someone who works in alignment, not urgency? So it's not always the resolution that changes you, it's the behaviors that you start to do daily. Now, goals are really important because they do give you somewhere to aim, but habits, those are build the foundation. So think of goals as the GPS. One of the analogies I like to use oftentimes is thinking about if you were given a bow and arrow and you didn't have a target to hit, right? So if we have a goal and that's our target, then at least we know where to aim. So if we think of a goal as the GPS or the strategy or that roadmap, then our habits are the engine. Now, what I have found is that most leaders set goals without building the habits that are actually going to support the goal. So we label them, we say them, we write them down, but then nothing else changes. So if we really want to scale your business, habits like daily revenue generating tasks, weekly team communication, quarterly planning are really, really key that we need to implement. If we want to improve your health, habits like hydration, daily movement, sleep consistency, right? That is what is actually going to get us the end result or the outcome. If we want to deepen our fulfillment, habits of gratitude, reflection, boundaries are all habits that we can change and implement to get the outcome of feeling more fulfilled. So goals really tell your brain where you're going. Habits tell your brain who you're becoming. Now, this is really clear in Atomic Habits because James Clear's biggest contribution to leadership and personal development is identity-based habits. So who you become matters more than what you do. And so true change comes from changing your identity, not your goals. So for example, instead of saying, I just want to become more confident, you start acting in alignment with a confident person. Instead of saying, I just need to get better at time management, you need to start showing up like someone who values their energy. So identity starts to drive behavior. And I hear this all the time in coaching, and I have to course correct a lot on just the power of words, where people will say, I am blank. I am always late, or I'm not good at that, or that doesn't work for me. And we have to really be mindful of that, because that's an identity that we are syncing to ourselves, and identity is going to drive behavior. So we need to be mindful of the way that we speak to ourselves, because that is going to reinforce behaviors that then create that identity. So it's sort of a loop, and it works in your favor when you choose intentionally. So what I've learned is that when my clients shift their identity even slightly, everything becomes easier, because you stop trying to force habits and you start living them really naturally. And so one of the most practical, researched backed tools for habit building is habit stacking. And that was taught by BJ Fogg. And he talks about that in his book, because habit stacking is kind of the secret strategy that actually works. And I've implemented this in many of the ways that I've grown as a leader. And I do this a lot with my clients as well, is really when we try to change everything, we change nothing. We might be able to maintain that for a few days, maybe a few weeks. But if we really take on this idea of habit stacking, is it really just means attaching a new habit to something you already do automatically. So for example, after I pour my coffee, I instantly just put my vital proteins right in my coffee. So one of my goals was to consume more protein this past year. And so one of the ways I habit stacked is, what am I already doing? Drinking coffee. How do I create a habit that's going to help me hit my goal? Well, I'm just adding that into the coffee, right? And so that could be a really, really easy habit stacking. Maybe when you have your coffee, you review your top 3 priorities. Maybe after you open your laptop, you send one message to a prospect. Maybe after you brush your teeth, you say one affirmation. And even something as simple as you finish your lunch, you do a 10-minute walk. So again, these little changes, or these habits, can reduce decision fatigue and increase consistency. And so what I found is that the easier you make the habit to start, the more likely it is to stick. So just picking one thing, and I know that we are getting to the end of a year, and so it's natural for us to start thinking about our goals going into the new year, but just thinking, what's one thing you can start next month? And so this is something that you can do throughout the year. What's one thing you can do in January? Just one thing, because you're more likely to stick to doing that than if we add a bunch of things. And if it's easy and it's one thing, then it takes away that decision fatigue. The 2-minute rule can make it too easy to fail. So another really good concept from Atomic Habits is that any habit can be scaled down into something that takes 2 minutes. So this is how you bypass procrastination, overwhelm, and perfection. So instead of saying, I'm going to write every day, I'm going to say, I'm just going to open my notebook. If you have time to write down 3 sentences, that is what it is. Instead of saying, oh, I got to work out, I just got to put on my gym shoes. Okay? Instead of I got to clean the kitchen is I'm going to just wash one dish. So we can really simplify by just a 2-minute task, because 2 minutes builds momentum, and momentum builds motivation, because action comes before motivation, not the other way around. And the power of these small wins, and why your brain really needs them, is Harvard researcher Teresa Ambelise wrote a book called The Progress Principle, which found that small wins create big emotional rewards and long-term motivation. And I actually was listening to the radio this morning, and they talked about an idea that's trending. I think it's trending on TikTok right now, about everybody sitting around, a table, whether you are celebrating Christmas or just in general celebrating, and writing on a popsicle stick or a piece of paper, what's a win that you had of this last year, and then going around and sharing that, because our society is really wired to talk about what didn't go great this year and all the things that are not good. And so just recreating that shift, that we're not bragging, but we are creating a culture that's going to celebrate this. Because the small little wins and the small progress releases dopamine. And then that's the brain's I can do this chemical. And so what I've found is that leaders lose momentum when they dismiss small wins. But small wins, what happens, they start to reinforce identity, they build confidence, they reduce resistance, create more fulfillment, and really support long-term consistency. So every habit begins with that one small win. Now, one of the most underrated concepts in business and personal growth is your environment shapes 80% of your behavior. So if you want better habits, change your environment. So examples with the changes of our habits would be putting your journal on your pillow or beside your bed. Put your running shoes by your door, or maybe in your closet where you've got your gym clothes ready to go. Keeping a water bottle on your desk, turning off phone notifications. creating even a work playlist that triggers focus, and just keeping your workspace organized. Because what I've learned is that leaders will really struggle when their environment is designed for distraction, not focus. And you don't need more willpower, right? We just need better surroundings. And leaders often treat rest as something that they earn. And using rest as a strategy is so powerful, and not just having it as a reward. Because in high performance, rest has to come first. So, really good books like Peak Performance and The Power of Full Engagement show that rest increases productivity, creativity, and emotional regulation, meaning that you're more likely to follow through on habits when you're not exhausted. So, your habit system collapses when you're overwhelmed. It's really hard to lead yourself well if you're running on adrenaline and burnout. And so, what I've seen is that the best leaders follow energy cycles, not just schedules. Rest fuels that consistency. And guess what? Consistency is going to fuel fulfillment. So, if you want lifelong growth, you need reflection rituals. So, whether that's reviewing your weekly, monthly, quarterly, a habit system without reflection just really becomes noisy and chaotic. So, consider adopting whether it's a weekly review, a monthly reset, even a quarterly audit. Questions that I'll use with clients, and something that we implement even daily, is doing an end of the day report. Especially most businesses, when we track certain key metrics, that's how we're going to be able to grow versus just feelings. And I often say lots of times that we want to look at facts, not just feelings. And so reflecting on what worked well today, maybe what felt heavy or draining, what brought you joy, fulfillment, and what habits supported your goals, maybe habits that didn't get done, and just what needs to change. Because we often think we need a new year to create the change. And it's really powerful, even at the end of a day or a week, by just that quick reflection, how we can pivot and we can get freshly started the next day, right? And so reflection will really keep you aligned, and alignment is what's going to keep you fulfilled. Now, leadership, fulfillment, and growth, and why these habits really, really matter, is the pillars that LFG Global Coaching is built on, is these three, is leadership, fulfillment, and growth. Because in leadership, you can't lead others without leading yourself first. So your habits model what's possible. When it comes to fulfillment comes from consistency, not intensity. And so your habits shape how you feel daily. And when we think about growth isn't sudden, it's compounding. So sustainable habits create sustainable growth, and habits turn dreams into predictable outcomes. So dreamers, here's the truth, is your resolutions don't define your year. Your habits do. So you don't need a perfect January. You just need consistent habits that support your identity all year long. You don't need motivation, you need systems. You don't need pressure, you need alignment. And you don't need resolutions, you need rituals. So if you want next year to feel different, your habits must lead that way. So if you're ready to build habits that support your leadership, your fulfillment, and your growth, come join the LFG Business Academy on School. It's completely free, and it's where I share tools, templates, and community coaching to help business owners build structure without burnout. You'll also get access to my mini leadership series, which gives you powerful, simple tools to lead yourself and your team at a higher level. And the link is in the show notes, and I'd love to see you inside the community. Thank you for listening today. I'm always so grateful for you being here. If this episode helped you, just take a screenshot, tag me. I'd love to cheer you on. And remember that your dream life starts with the way you lead, the way you live, and the way you grow. I will see you next time on your Dream Coach podcast.